Saparivrajakacharyashtra Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavat. Oops, well, I'll build you a temple. Reading Ki Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaham Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Kada Mayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shuddhapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gorangira Devi Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyayevacha Patitanam Panavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jayo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we are reading from I'll Build You a Temple by His Holiness Giriraj Swami. This is the chapter entitled Arriving on the Scene, a Good Fight. Sometimes we would also give members specially selected gifts, and I try to enlist the help of devotees in America to arrange a steady supply and to ensure that members were nicely cared for when they visited our centers abroad. So Giraj Maharaj is talking about taking care of the life members, and I just have some little personal experience. I think I only made one life member so far, but it was in South India. And I was like, on the idea was that usually they have that perception that if I become a life member of ISKCON, then I can travel worldwide and I can, be facilitated for practically all my travels and stay and everything else. So there is like a very deep misconception, and very often one has to kind of encounter that kind of misconception, trying to resolve it, pointing out that what are really an options that and the facilities that potential life member can gain. So that has to be very clear, because otherwise then what may follow, it's a big disappointment. So in initial days we see that the devotees, they, of course, all the time, but sometimes it does happen that there is no proper presentation of what ISKCON can facilitate, and therefore they end up in a lot of different kind of ends up in a lot of different kinds of misunderstandings that what ISKCON can offer and what it really means therefore to be a life member. But we see, like here we have a very steady, and Srila Prabhupada started this very attractive life membership program, and mostly for the purpose of distributing books. That was the main reason. There's no any other reason but that. Tamal Krishna Maharaj explains this. Srila Prabhupada, when he was in Japan, he disclosed that conception, that program of life membership, and the main reason again was just to distribute as many books. So the one who becomes a life member, he receives the whole set. Nowadays, of course, that time there were not so many books, but whichever have been printed, then they would be given. And then of course there are other side benefits, there are other benefits that one receives. So here Giriraj Maharaj is talking about life members who had been cared for and wherever they would go. But that's not easy, because many times it doesn't mean that every center, every temple has a facility. Yeah, worldwide. It's not like every temple, it's just like Radha Das Bihari temple, there is a guest house and everything else. Many temples, even they can hardly, or centers, they can hardly accommodate devotees, or to speak of any guests or so. So this is why Giriraj Maharaj, he is pointing out here that he would ensure members that they were nicely cared when they visited centers abroad. So that's like really outstretching. It's not just taking care of somebody who comes to this particular place or somewhere nearby, but taking care of everyone whenever they would visit anywhere abroad. That's definitely requires an additional effort. As I informed Srila Prabhupada by post, I have written Rupanuga, Karandar, Bhagavan and Svatsvarup Prabhus that they could help get donations for Indian projects indirectly by providing first-class treatment for the life members who visit USA. As the grateful members will certainly express their satisfaction with our movement when they return to India. Life members and others are or will be mad after our gramophone records and art posters. So if they could be sent free, like the books, the members will be enthusiastic to give more by donation. And we can make money also on direct door-to-door sales. So I have written Jayatirtha Prabhu in LA to send posters, and if you confirm that a quantity of them be sent here, I'm sure they will be useful for selling. Similarly, the life members love our Radha Krishna postage stamps, and I hope they could be sent also. So devotees in the West, they were printing, they had so many wonderful posters. Like nowadays we have so many different pictures that can be framed, that can be given. And also that time there were gramophone records. That doesn't exist. I don't know if anyone can even conceive now what does it mean practically. Like even CDs or discs or anything, DVDs. That's also out, for quite some years now. But in those days they had the gramophone records. They were like quite big. That's quite big size, like a big plate, So there were all kinds of different, like we know. Radha Krishna temple, devotees had, there were a number of devotees who had made the records, and of course that time George Harrison with Hare Krishna Maha Mantra or any devotional chants. So this is something that Giriraj Maharaj considered would be very, very attractive for the life members. And definitely it was something coming from the West, it was a novelty, would be attractive for everyone, as it was attractive for the devotees even abroad. And surely again, taking care of life members, or practically as such any devotees, that is something specifically in the field of fundraising. There is something known as a donor pyramid, where there is a system presented where one responds to any kind of donation by smaller or later on larger gifts, and of course all with the aim to try to give as much as Krishna consciousness. Like what do we give, for example, as the gifts? Like when there is a marathon time or anything else, we just give more books, right? We give more books, we give more, we give more paintings, pictures, whatever it is there, japa, or at that time, as it is mentioned here, any kind of records. So just to enable one to be exposed more and more to Krishna consciousness. So in this way, when devotees reciprocated like this by giving it more, then naturally also the donors, the life members were also reciprocating. So the entire basis of our relationship with the donors was our encouraging them in Krishna consciousness. If we had had any other motive, they would have perceived our duplicity, and the sublime quality of our relationship would have been spoiled. The next exchange is pratigrinati, accepting gifts. When I engaged in dadati, giving gifts, I tried not to be too anxious about pratigranati, accepting gifts in return. I was convinced that if we help people advance spiritually, Krishna would be pleased, and that if Krishna was pleased, others would also be pleased, and our mission would be successful. Pratigranati would follow automatically when the relationship was sufficiently developed along the other 5 principles of loving exchanges. So this is just natural for any devotee, that they just want to give as much Krishna consciousness as possible. Just some weeks ago, there was one foreign couple, and they came here to the temple, and let's have a little introductory talk, and then after that, they heard about Bhagavad Gita, so they said that they're interested to buy Bhagavad Gita. And then we didn't have on their language, but then they settled for English. And then I said there are some other books, that they could consider reading. And that one lady, she just pulled out 500 rupees. And she gave 500 rupees. And then the devotee on the gift book table, he tried to give her change back, but then she said, no, you take it, that's a donation. That's a donation. And then I said, okay, then you take some more books. I take some more books. There's some nice books, Science of Self-Realization, and so there are a couple of others. So then they took some other books. And of course, still there was some Lakshmi left kind of for all of those as well, but then they still didn't want to take that. They said, keep it as a donation. And then once we came to Srila Prabhupada's quarters, then they were very appreciative. And then she also pulled some, more than 100, 200, whatever, was more rupees there, and then they put in the donation box. So it's just natural, it's just that kind of reciprocation. As we devotees, when any kind of donation comes, that's again, it's natural. You try to give them more and more and more and more, of whatever, more books, more prasadam, more anything. And they definitely also then reciprocate, being very pleased. As a rule, after giving someone a gift, I would never accept any payment or donation on the spot, even if the person offered. I asked only later when we needed substantial help for some major project. And by then, most people were already eager and glad to help. So this is very interesting. Giraj Maharaj is saying that he wouldn't accept any payment or donation on the spot. But later on, when then anything else would be required. And also interestingly, very often devotees would ask for advice. If they would meet any very, very prominent person, they wouldn't just ask immediately for donation, they would ask for advice. Because many times it is understood that advice can be far more beneficial than just some kind of little immediate donation. So it depends who the person is. Of course, that devotees had to have some discriminative experience. And it proved many times that when such kind of prominent personalities would have been approached, that advice was far more valuable than just any donation. For very great personalities, like Srila Prabhupada once, he came to one of the Birlas, and he asked for a huge donation. He asked for first, just for building the temple here, he asked for a huge donation, and then one devotee accompanying him was kind of taken aback that's really a lot. That's really a lot. So then Srila Prabhupada pointed out that when you approach a big man, you don't ask for small things, because they might feel offended. It's not like Vamandev asking Bali Maharaj, you don't ask just for 3 steps of land or something. No, you ask for a lot, for a lot. Of course, it turned out later on that because Srila Prabhupada needed actually donation in a particular currency, I think it was in dollars or something, and then that transaction actually didn't happen as such. But there was some other later reciprocation that was there. So like this, when any prominent personality would have been approached, then also devotees, they develop that sense of understanding then how actually they should reciprocate with them, how they should present things to them, how they should utilize their abilities, whether it is again advice or even from that financial point of view, all in Krishna's service. The approach worked, and I saw it worked elsewhere as well. One young congregational devotee from Bombay went to a rural ISKCON community in America and took over the management of the temple's guest house. When instead of charging for the rooms, he focused on caring for the guests and then asked for donations at the end of their stay, the guest house revenues went up 4-fold. So instead of just charging someone like this immediately, let's say you pay for the certain price and then that's it, then that's all what you get. Like sometimes, well, quite years now, I mean, maybe more than 10 years, and even earlier at some other place in South India. One was at Ahovilam. There is one. There used to be one kind of Brahmin Bhojan place, and they wouldn't accept any Lakshmi as such. They would just say, "You give a donation, whatever you want, or even if you don't want, you just take prasadam. It didn't matter." So actually, what they found out when they treated people and guests like this, that they would receive in donation far more than actually they would just charge for a certain meal, certain amount. It was just far more profitable even from that point of view. But what to speak of building certain type of relationship and developing appreciation. So it's a whole different approach that what we usually kind of would have think to have. And there was that story circulating sometimes back in Rajasthan. There were some foreign couple. They came to Jaipur, and then they were looking for different restaurants. And somehow, by Google's mistake, they were taken to one of the villages outside. Somehow, it's so, by Krishna's arrangement, it so happened. And then in that village, they came to one man's house, and that man started arranging for their dinner, and then they were asking what else is there, and that man was very, very hospitable. And they were asking them, what about this, what about that? And whatever practically they inquired for, they were supplied. And then at the end, they said, okay, how much we have to pay? And then the man said, nothing. This is my house. Yeah, you're my guests here. You don't have to pay for anything. And then these people couldn't believe. They were so impressed. They were so impressed. Actually, they were like practically stunned that that is the hospitality of rural India. Yeah, that is the culture. That is the tradition. That they kept on coming even further later on, so many times, and of course, facilitating so many other things. So it's a matter of culture. It's just a matter of particular type of exchange that one can have within the service attitude. And we see, as Giriraj Maharaj pointed out here, giving this example of a devotee here, that the revenues went up fourfold. People become far more impressed with the selfless service rather than one charges something for whatever he has done. The next exchange in Bhojayate, giving prasad, Prabhupada taught us how to hold feasts on Sundays and other special days and to make a special effort to invite our friends and members. He personally organized the first life member feast in Juhu and had his disciples, who were acting as hosts, perform all the services for the members, whom he treated as honored guests. Later, whenever Prabhupada received special guests, he would insist that they take full prasad. Sometimes the guests protested, "We cannot take prasad in front of you, Srila Prabhupada." But he always insisted, "No, I will be happy to see you take prasad." If you give a man full prasad, he once said, he will do anything for you. So that's a common saying, that the way to someone's heart is through someone's belly. So it's prasadam. Prasadam opens all the doors. So interestingly, I heard Giriraj Maharaj also mentioning earlier that whenever they would go out to make the life membership, to make the life members, they would have a very small container with some Mahaprasadam. Yeah, they would have small container. It's even nowadays devotees, they carry in their briefcases or bags. They go, and when they would meet anyone, they would just give very, very little portion. Mahaprasad. This is like really special Mahaprasad. Just very little. That's enough. And in general, people have that kind of conception that Mahaprasada means something very, very little. Yeah. I'd be very shocked, and that had happened, very shocked when somebody would bring the whole plate or something. You know, this is it, Mahaprasadam, like here, to full satisfaction if somebody's served as such. So that was another point that Giriraj Maharaj is saying here. In his absence, when special guests came for a feast, I would often sit and talk with them, direct the serving, and try to see that they were satisfied in every respect. The next two exchanges are Guhyam Akyati Prichati, inquiring about and explaining confidential topics. While giving gifts and prasad, I always try to explain the confidential science of Krishna consciousness and give donors a solid philosophical background for further devotional service. And when the time came to engage a person in some particular service, I would present the rationale for the service on the basis of reason and philosophy and disclose the request in a straightforward manner. I would endeavor to present our philosophy intelligently, without compromise, but keeping in mind the understanding of the individual whom I was addressing. So that is the expertise of a preacher, to understand how much particular person can digest, how much particular person can understand and accept of Krishna consciousness. So it's not just some kind of, in the West they have the expression, what's your spiel? Spiel means what's your deal, what's your presentation, what's your, what can you offer? It's not like you go to a certain store and then there's some mechanical mantras about this product and that product or something like this. No, that becomes very monotone, boring, and just mechanical. And it's not so attractive. It's not so attractive. Rather, even in the, like these management circles, it is understood that when one presents things on the basis of understanding what is one's position, that has far, far greater effect. Far greater effect. Like if one visits and wants to buy some kind of product or what, then you're asking, what are your requirements? What is the situation? What do you expect? Like various different kinds of things. And one has to inquire. And then based on that, then one can present something. Yeah. Based on that, one can have some kind of presentation. And then definitely the person who inquires or wants to buy a certain product will be far more impressive, rather than when you come somewhere and it just kind of tells you mantra, gives you that kind of a spiel. And it's definitely not as impressive. So devotees also, they have this experience then when they try to first understand person's position and level of understanding to whichever extent that is, then they can further present Krishna consciousness. So in that sense, inquiring about and explaining confidential topics, and specifically what is confidential? Well, everything about pretty much Krishna consciousness, deeper Krishna consciousness is confidential. So then one has to see that how much to present to the people, which level they are, and how to encourage them. The whole idea is to encourage them to advance in the spiritual life. Not just to kind of say, okay, this is as it is, and then you take it or leave it. It's like, then that would be very counterproductive. Because very often, how can people, it's the deepest philosophy practically. I mean, there is no philosophy as philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Here in India, of course, people do have some traditions still left, some Vedic culture still left, but even we can see that very often it is difficult for them to relate to Krishna consciousness. Specifically, even more so, those who have Mayavadi, misunderstandings. Or impersonalism, like this. And of course, many other different types of attachments. And then to straightforwardly present Krishna consciousness or certain standards of Krishna conscious practice, that can become repelling rather than attractive. So, therefore, devotee has to have certain experience to understand what level the person is and then present Krishna consciousness. And have that kind of exchange that will be inspiring to the one. From my seniors, I learned to direct prospective supporters' doubts. From my seniors, I learned to detect prospective supporters' doubts, even without their expressing them, and then speak in such a way as to remove them. During my initial training in Bombay, I went with Madhuvisha to meet a wealthy businessman who had promised to become a life member. But when we were in the man's office, he reneged. I had expected Madhuvisha to say, "You promised to give. You can't refuse now." But instead, he just talked with the man for 20 minutes. Then almost mystically to me, the man opened his desk drawer and wrote out his check. When I first went out on my own and approached an industrialist to become a life member, the man said, "First, I have to ask my brothers." That is the most common for any. I have to ask my wife. Wife will say, "I have to ask my husband." Or someone will say, "I have to ask my parents. I have to ask the whole neighborhood. Then maybe we will decide whether we can, give some donation or not." It's like, when I reported this to Shyama Sundar, who had given me the industrialist's name and sent me, he told me, "That's just an excuse. You have to be intelligent enough to understand the person's doubts and address them without him even bringing them up." Of course, for that one has to be quite intuitive. It's kind of connecting to Paramatma as much as possible through one's chanting, one's purity, and try to understand what is it that affects this man not to become so outcoming generous. After visiting someone many times with gifts and inviting him to Juhu for prasad, which naturally involved his or her seeing Hare Krishna land, I might feel that the time had come to engage them in some particular substantial service. So that's essential. If people just come visiting and offering their prayers and requesting so many things, and then even Srila Prabhupada said, practically just coming for darshan without hearing, it's almost as useless. So either there has to be some kirtan bhajan going on, either some katha, some kind of sound, spiritual sound vibration has to be there. Otherwise, just having an eye darshan, it's not good enough. It's not going to affect anyone's heart as much as hearing, which we know is the main process. So that also, when somebody comes, hopefully for some time, and develops certain relationship with the devotees, then again, what is it that we chant for? We chant for, please, dear Radha and Krishna, engage us in your service. So unless that kind of engagement is there, then how can one progress in spiritual life? It's impossible. So then one has to be engaged in any particular service, whatever it might be. Any little kind of engagement will make one progressive in spiritual life. It will give one taste for spiritual practice. It will give one so many different kinds of realizations. Of course, we know the most famous example of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj engaging Manmohan Mallavya in Allahabad. He was considered to be a very great scholar, a big man, and having so many questions. And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj instructed one of his disciples to inform him that he is engaged for some time, and then later on he will meet him and answer all of his questions, and that in the meantime he goes and helps devotees. And when one devotee engaged him in the cleaning pots in the kitchen, and then after that service, when he was asked to meet Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, and he did meet him, and then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj inquired from him that, what are your questions, what are your doubts? And then he said, I don't have them. All of them have been answered. So we see, just by practical engagement, how much one can gain, how much mercy also one receives as such, that through Paramatma, practically one can be given and receive all kinds of answers to whatever doubts one might be having. And of course, additionally gaining so much taste for spiritual life. If it is just some kind of intellectual approach, of intellectual understanding, that how long can one hold to this? But when one is personally engaged, like that's known in the teaching circles, that if the students are just receiving knowledge, that they won't appreciate that knowledge as much, or they won't be as dedicated as when the teacher is directly and personally involved in certain project with them, when they work together. It makes an enormous difference in that kind of exchange, in that kind of teaching. The appreciation and the desire for learning and absorption will be far, far greater. So therefore, engaging someone in the service, of course, there are various levels of serving, as Krishna explains in Srimad Bhagavad Gita in 12th chapter. One can give one's full mind and intelligence, or one can do some work for Krishna, or offer the fruit of one's work, or engage in some other kind of beneficial activity. So depending on the level, so whichever level, to whichever extent, the devotee has to be able to recognize how to engage someone in Krishna's service. Okay, one second. Whenever I did make a request, I would keep in mind Prabhupada's instructions on how ISKCON supporters could engage in Dadati. During one of our first meetings with life members in Bombay, he quoted Srimad Bhagavatam 10:22-35. Etavaj janma safalyam dehinam dehishu pranayr arthair diyavacha shreya archanam sada. It is the duty of every living being to perform welfare activities for the benefit of others with his life, wealth, intelligence, and words. So Srila Prabhupada would give this verse. So it is the duty of every living being to perform welfare activities for the benefit of others with his life, wealth, intelligence, and words. So this is what everyone has to do. At least everyone who considers himself to be a human being. Otherwise, if one doesn't benefit others, is just so self-centered, then that is not a position of human existence. So he explained that first of all, as individuals living parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, people had a duty to give pranayar, their life. But if someone was unable to give his life, at least he should give his wealth, because next to our life, the most valued, our wealth. Well, sometimes it turns that the wealth is more important than the life also. People become so attached, so attached to all kinds of possessions. So whichever, anyway, whatever one can, either life or wealth, whatever one can offer to Krishna. The combined effort of one's intelligence, words, and time produced wealth. So by giving his wealth, the person would automatically be giving his intelligence, words, and time in a concentrated form. So giving one's wealth also would be equal to giving one's intelligence, words, and time. And if the person gave his wealth to Krishna, he could also say that the entire effort that produced the wealth was purified and spiritualized. Of course, that's what Krishna is saying. Yagyartat karma nonyatram lokya karma bandhana tadartam karma konteya mukta sangha samhachara. That one has to give some fruit, some result to Krishna. Otherwise one becomes bound by the activities, certain activities that one performs. So in this way, one's existence becomes purified. Otherwise, whatever one does, and it's utilizing this particular fruit of one's result, then it will just bind the person. It will not purify the person. It will entangle the person. And it will make him being responsible then. Yes, one may have then that facility and get a result, but then one also carries the responsibility for all of those. One carries the reactions for all of those. So that's why Krishna explaining akarma in Bhagavad Gita says that, but if one offers his work or fruits of his work to him, then one is not held responsible for any reactions. But one still gets the benefit of what? Of performing this particular service. So as the person would give his wealth, then everything that he endeavored for to, in a way that he gained that wealth, that would be spiritualized, that would be beneficial for that person. When we ask people to contribute, Prabhupada told us, some might challenge, how do you sell God? In reply he said, we should quote the Bhagavad Gita, 9:27. Yat karoshi yadashnasi yat juhoshi dadasi yat tapasyasi konteya tat kurushua mad arpanam. So how many times we hear, give Bhagavad Gita for free? No? This is spiritual. Give it for free. Why you are selling Bhagavad Gita? Then what is the reply? What is the reply? Why don't you give Bhagavad Gita for free? Huh? Okay, so that we can print more. So give some donation. Okay. Any other? What do you do when somebody says, oh, just give it for free? What was just stated earlier also, just here? Just a paragraph earlier that I read. What is the point? Huh? Ask for donations, yes, but on basis of what? Huh? No. For their spiritual benefit. Yes. That's another thing. People don't value when they get it free. Prabhupada never encouraged giving anything for free, because then they take it for granted that they don't value it. But they also benefit. Then how will they benefit? If they just received everything freely, then how will one benefit? How will one get purified? How will one purify one's work, one's life, one's anything, if it's not connected to Krishna then? So then Srila Prabhupada would quote this verse saying that whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, and whatever austerities you perform, do that, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me. So that's why whatever one does in any way, practically it has to be offered to Krishna. And if you have no wealth, Prabhupada advised that we should say, then you can give your intelligence. You can advise the devotees, approach such and such person, he can help. In this way you can serve by dhiya intelligence. So that's another thing. Then, especially it happens in life membership, how many times one person refers to somebody else, and that's actually how so many more members are made. And if you have no intelligence, then help by vacha, words. You can request whomever you meet, please chant Hare Krishna, please visit the temple. Shyamasundar told me that the wealthy were accustomed to people coming to them for their money. So naturally they were on the defensive. I didn't want them to feel that way with me. And when they saw that I actually cared for them, they became more open and relaxed. With the close ones, whether there was a death or wedding or other major event, I was always there. So it's not just some kind of business transaction. How many times it is pointed that the fundraising can and should become a friend-raising. And also in that sense, by connected to Krishna consciousness, becomes a fundraising as well. So it's a fun, it's a pleasure. But the emphasis is on developing friendship. So this is how we started discussing today. It's that everything, any such kind of approach to bring people closer to Krishna consciousness, it's based on friendship. It's based on how do we benefit them to become Krishna conscious, not just to try to extract something for them. Although that as well also would benefit them, but in a way that they become appreciative and become more eager to come closer to Krishna. And of course become more friendly with the devotees. So that was the biggest challenge, that when somebody would have been approached, that they just have that conception in their mind that it's just for some donation, that it's just for some money. So this is how devotees have developed various kinds of strategies to present Krishna consciousness and present also, especially in this life membership program, that what is it that it will benefit those people, first of all. And then what they can engage. They can engage again. It's not just wealth, it can be intelligence, it can be words, it can be time, it can be anything. Yeah. Like the very famous story of, since Giriraj Maharaj is mentioning Shyamasundar Prabhu, like how Shyamasundar Prabhu was asked by Srila Prabhupada to go and ask George Harrison for a donation to print his Krishna book. And I don't know, I think it was 10,000 pounds or something. That was 19, great. So that's even, it's a huge amount. It's enormously huge amount. And then how Shyamasundar Prabhu was so reserved. He said that he was shocked actually. He couldn't believe, first of all, that Srila Prabhupada would request him to do this. Yeah? Because he had a conception that we are developing certain friendly relationship. And he said to Prabhupada that now if I go and ask him for money, it will definitely break our relationship. It will definitely break our relationship. That we have this nice friendly dealings and nice cooperation in so many ways, and then now if I ask him directly for money, then our friendship is over. And he was reluctant. Practically, he didn't want to do it. He was like, just sometimes when you're requested to do something and it's just completely shattering your ego, your old conceptions that you have, it becomes enormously difficult to perform such kind of type of devotional service. But then Shyamasundar Prabhu, then he somehow he was contemplating, and on the basis of understanding that still it is spiritual master's order, and and Srila Prabhupada also say, you just go do it and Krishna will help you. Yeah. So then with that in his mind, then still practically he said till the last moment he was so reluctant to do that, to perform this service. He was so reluctant, but still he went. And he was sitting with George Harrison together at the table, and it was very, very difficult. It was extremely difficult. And then somehow or other, it was really time to go. And then he said, "Okay, I have to do this." And then he asked him. Could you? Srila Prabhupada asked, "Could you sponsor for printing of the Krishna book?" And there was a pin drop silence. And then he saw the expression on Judge Harrison's face. He said, like, he was shocked. He was shocked. He was taken aback. And then what had happened, because there was a storm, it was raining, and there was a big lightning and thunder, and the electricity went off. It was kind of a sign of Krishna. And then when electricity came back, then the George Harrison said, how could I refuse? And he agreed. So then Shamsundar Prabhu explains how much he was relieved. He was like, so asking for a donation, asking for money, it wasn't like this. When one builds up certain relationship, so then it's a very delicate approach that's required. But that's what the emphasis was, and that's it. Again, and one becomes friends with someone, that's for lifetime. It's not just for certain, like how many times, I mean, I have personal experience many times when you get cheated in certain shops, when they charge you more than what it actually should be. So many times it happens. Then how do you feel after that? Do you want to deal with this? Do you want to go to that shop again or something? Or do you want to deal with these people again or something? Definitely not. You feel really like you feel exploited, you feel abused. But if one develops friendship and develops certain trust, and then specifically even more so from the perspective of Krishna consciousness, and that makes enormous difference. It makes enormous difference. And specifically more so in relationship, because through relationship, what will they be inspired to do? They'll be inspired to come more to temple, they'll be inspired more to take to Krishna conscious activities, practices, and then donation or anything else, that's naturally there. When one actually gives one's life, then with the life everything else comes along. It's not required to ask for it separately. So that's how Giriraj Maharaj explains, whenever there would any kind of ceremony happening in their house or event or whatever, that he would always be there. He wouldn't just come asking for money in the office or whatever, but then there would be very friendly exchanges going on, supportive. Once I approached one of our friends for a large donation for Juhu, but he was hesitating. Finally I said, so many people are coming to visit you, but who is thinking of you? They are simply thinking of their own benefit. How can they exploit you? What they can get from you? Perhaps we are the only ones in the world who actually care for your spiritual well-being. As soon as he heard these words, he agreed, yes, I will give. When we reciprocated in these exchanges of love with our members, both they and we made spiritual advancement. We had only to be concerned for their spiritual well-being, how somehow or other they could be engaged in service to the lotus feet of Krishna. In reciprocation for our sincerity and love, they responded. So this is again how we see that when devotees have just Krishna in mind, how then there is that very firm reciprocation that manifests from the desire to bring someone closer to Krishna and engage them in Krishna's service. Okay, so we will stop here. I'll build you a temple. Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande. Okay. Radha Krishna Prabhu. I hope any comment about that kind of approach?
Just like Maharaj, Giriraj Maharaj की यादें मैं हिंदी में आपको बताऊंगा, अभी इनको हिंदी बताता हूँ कि जैसे प्रभु जी ने कहा कि गिरिराज स्वामी ये जो लिख रहे हैं, ये बता रहे हैं, वो अपने जीवन में घटी हुई घटना बता रहे हैं, उन्होंने किया हुई बात को लिख रहे हैं। जैसे उन्होंने कहा कि प्रसाद जो हम जब मेंबर को जाते हैं तो प्रसाद देते हैं, प्रसाद के माध्यम से वो कैसे मेंबर कल्टिवेशन करते हैं और किसी प्रकार से उनका भाव को ऑब्जर्व करके उन कैसे उन्होंने से निकालते हैं, ये सब आइडिया बता रहे हैं। साथ साथ में बता रहे हैं कि मधु विशाख प्रभु के साथ में जब गए थे तो अब उन्होंने देखा कि वो मेंबर आगे पीछे कर रहा है, लेकिन गिरिराज स्वामी ने उनको छोड़ा नहीं। 20 मिनट तक लेक्चर दिया लेक्चर देने के बाद वो आदमी कन्विंस हो गया और चेक दे देते। मधु विश्वा प्रभु समझे थे कि ये कुछ दिन देने वाला नहीं है, खाली फुकट में यहाँ तक आए हम लोग, ऐसे समझ रहा था वो। लेकिन गिरिराज स्वामी ने उनको छोड़ा नहीं, बिल्कुल 20 मिनट तक उनको कन्विंस किया और बाद में फिर उन्होंने चेक दे दिया। तो सेम लाइक मैं भी एक बार ऐसे ही पहली बार जब मेंबरशिप, तो आसिम कृष्ण प्रभु आप मेरे सन्यासी बने हो, उनको मैं लेके गया था नरीमल पॉइंट, और वो आदमी बार बार बोलता प्रभु जी आइए ना आइए ना आइए ना। अब यहाँ से नरीमल पॉइंट जाने के लिए कितना टाइम लगता है, गाड़ी है, ये है, पेट्रोल है। उधर जाने के बाद बोलता है नहीं अभी फार्म नहीं फिलअप करूँगा बाद में। तो मैं तो प्रचार कर रहा हूँ, लेकिन आसिम कृष्ण प्रभु गर्म हो रहे वो गर्म हो रहे हैं और वो बोल रहे क्यों बुलाया, फिर हमको क्यों बुलाया, आपको मालूम है 500 रुपये लगाने के लगा, डायरेक्ट बोल दिया। तो मैंने कहा कि शांति से क्या करें, अभी जैसे आया भी ऐसे करते करते, बट 2 हफ्ते के बाद उन्होंने चेक दे दिया। तो महाराज अपने जीवन में बता रहे हैं। दूसरी बात महाराज ने बताया जो प्रसाद है, प्रसाद देते हैं लोगों को, ये बंधुओं ये प्रसाद आपको ही नहीं, बाहर के लोगों को नहीं, अंदर के लोगों को भी देते थे। आज लोग आप भक्त बने हो, ये सिंसियर बात है, ध्यान से सुनो, आप लोग भक्त बने हो, कोई प्रेसिडेंट आपको बुलाया ना होगा कि तुम क्या कर रहे हो, कितनी माला जप कर रहे हो, 16 माला का जप कर रहे हो कि नहीं, कौन सी किताब पढ़ रहे हैं कि नहीं, और क्या प्रसाद ले रहे हैं कि नहीं, तुम्हें टूथपेस्ट मिलता है कि नहीं, ऐसा कोई पूछा प्रेसिडेंट आज तक? कोई हाथ उठाओ, कोई नहीं। लेकिन गिरिराज स्वामी एक से एक प्रेसिडेंट थे, हम उन जमाने के भक्त है 2, हम लोगों को हर हफ्ते में जैसे संकीर्तन से आएंगे हमको ऑफिस में बुलाते थे। उनके एक सेक्रेटरी थे, बोलते उसको बुला के मेरे पास ला के बाजू में बिठा कर पूछते थे कौन सी किताब पढ़ रहे हो, कितनी माला जप हो रही है, प्रसाद कैसा मिल रहा है, टूथपेस्ट है कि नहीं आपके, यहाँ तक पूछते टूथपेस्ट है कि नहीं आपके पास। तो ऐसे सज्जन महाराज हैं कहाँ मिलेंगे। देखो तो ये जो है हमें ये भक्तों को सीखना चाहिए, ना कि बाहर वाले को ही नहीं देना, अंदर वाले को भी समझाना चाहिए, क्योंकि हम सब कुछ त्याग कर यहाँ आए हुए हैं। और यहाँ पर अगर प्रेम नहीं मिलेगा, भाव नहीं मिलेगा, हमारे मन की जो चीज़ें है वो प्राप्त नहीं होगी, तो हम कैसे समझ सकते हैं इस बात को। तो महाराज ऐसे करते थे, महाराज सबको बुलाकर पूछते थे कैसे है, क्या हो, क्या हो रहा है तुम्हारी लाइफ में, क्योंकि तुम संन्यास लेने वाले हो, कल ब्रह्मचारी बन गए, लाल कपड़े पहन गए, इसका मतलब क्या है। इंडिया में लाल कपड़ा पहनना मतलब बस गया। उड़ीसा वाले को पूछो या बिहार वाले को या किसी को पूछो, लाल कपड़ा पहना वो समाज खलास हो गया, अभी उसका अभी साधु बन गया, वो वापस नहीं आने वाला है। तो महाराज पूछते थे क्या करोगे, कल प्रेसिडेंट बनने वाले हो तुम जनरल मैनेजर बनने वाले हो, तुम्हारी क्या क्वालिफिकेशन है, अभी तुम कैसे कर रहे हो, क्या डेवलप कर रहे हो, ये महाराज पूछते थे। और इसको कहते हैं शुभ चिंतक। ये हम लोगों ने अनुभव किया अपने जीवन में कि महाराज ऐसे व्यक्ति थे, तभी जाके उन्होंने, तो यहाँ पर जो दूसरा पॉइंट उन्होंने बताया कि महाराज भगवान कहते हैं कि सब कुछ बुद्धि देते हैं भगवान। जिसे उन्होंने बताया कि मधु विश्वा प्रभु का ये किया, तो प्रभुपाद ने कहा तो पैसा मांगो, लेकिन वो हिचकिचते थे, अरे कैसा पैसा मांगे, इतना बड़ा आदमी, वो बीट नाम से जो बैंड था वो बड़ा फेमस था उस समय, और एक दौर था ऐसा, वो छोटा आदमी नहीं था, वो आदमी हरिशंस छोटा आदमी नहीं था, और ये 1-2 बार मिले थे उससे, लेकिन पैसा मांगना है। और प्रभु जी ने कहा कि मैजिक कृष्ण की है, लाइट चली गई, ठंडर हो रहा था, बिजली चमक रही थी, सब कुछ हो रहा था, और जैसी लाइट आई उन्होंने पूछा श्याम सुंदर जी को क्या चाहिए, तो उन्होंने कहा गुरुजी ने मुझे ऐसा बोला है, बुक मेरा कृष्ण बुक प्रिंटिंग करने का है, मुझे पैसा चाहिए। तो उन्होंने चेक लिख के दिया $2 के रूप में। तो भगवान ददामि बुद्धि योगम थे, भगवान सबको बुद्धि देते हैं। अगर कोई गुरु मुख का पद्म हुआ क्या चित्ते करिया क्या, प्रभुपाद ने कहा था, इसी प्रकार से उन्होंने दोहराया, अपनी बुद्धि उसमें नहीं लगाई, और अब किसी प्रकार से मांगना है ये भी उनको मालूम नहीं था। क्या मालूम होगा बताइए प्रभु लोग, वो कोई चौबे के लड़के नहीं थे, चतुर्वेदी के लड़के नहीं थे, वो लोग कैसे लड़के थे, वो क्या मालूम था उनको कैसी प्रीचिंग करनी, कैसा मालूम था। आप लोग तो कुछ तो बैकग्राउंड है, दादी मामी कुछ तो सिखाया होगा रामकृष्ण का भजन करने के लिए, उनको कौन सिखाया था, क्या था उनके पास, लेकिन ओनली गुरु कृपा, सिर्फ गुरु की कृपा और कृष्ण कृपा से सब कुछ चला। तो ये जो किताब है ये बड़ा सार ग्रहित किताब है, ध्यान से सुना करो। और जो गिरिराज स्वामी बता रहे हैं वो उनके जीवन में उतरी हुई बातें बता रहे हैं। ऐसे नहीं कि लिख रहे ऐसे, नहीं, दूसरे की कहानी नहीं लिख रहे, स्वयं की कहानी लिख रहे हैं। उन्होंने कैसे डेवलप किया लाइफ मेंबरशिप के लिए, कैसे डेवलप किया भारतीय डोनरों को लिए। आज भी उनके कितने बड़े डोनर हैं, जाते ही पूछते हैं गिरिराज स्वामी कहाँ है। कितने साल हो गए, वो लोग भूले नहीं हैं। उनकी उम्र 80 साल की है, 75 साल की है, लेकिन वो पूछते हैं गिरिराज स्वामी किधर है, क्योंकि उनका जो एसोसिएशन था वो बहुत ही। दूसरी बात उन्होंने कहा कि हम हर घर में जाते हैं, यहाँ तक कोई मरने वाला आदमी है उसके घर में भी जाते हैं। एक बिरला बोल के एक बिरला है व्यक्ति, उसका नाम बिरला है, वो बिरला नहीं है, लेकिन वो प्रभुपाद जी को बहुत डोनेशन दिया था। जब गिरिराज स्वामी उसको कल्टिवेशन किए तब उन्होंने एक दिन, उनके 2 भाई थे, उनको एक ब्लड कैंसर था। तब उन्होंने एक आदमी को भेजा। तो मैं और नरसिंह चैतन्य का नाम सुना होगा, नरसिंह चैतन्य उस समय कमांडर थे, हम गेट के सामने थे, तो आके हमको मिला। उन्होंने कहा कि ऐसे ऐसे घर से मैं आया हूँ और वो गिरिराज स्वामी को बुलाया हुआ है। गिरिराज स्वामी तो इधर नहीं थे, तो हम लोग कहा कि चलो हम जाते हैं। तो भीमा प्रभु के पास गए और भीमा प्रभु कहा तुम दोनों जाओ उधर। जब हम गए वहाँ पर, और वो गिरिराज स्वामी की इतनी ग्लोरी की पूछो मत। उन्होंने कहा कि मेरा भाई शायद 1 महीने के अंदर मर जाएगा, उसको ब्लड कैंसर है, एक रूम में रखा हुआ है, वो पाइप से सब खाना पीना खिलाते थे उनको। हम लोग गए वहाँ पर और हमको, तो उन्होंने 40,000 रुपया जो है गाय के लिए दिया और 40,000 रुपया गाय के खाने के लिए दिया, 1 साल का पैसा दे दिया। और उनका गिरिराज स्वामी को ये जरूर बात बताना, मरते समय वो आदमी वो जो बोल रहा था उसका आवाज़ बराबर नहीं आ रहा था, लेकिन वो अंदर से बोल रहा था रूम के कि टेल द गिरिराज स्वामी तो मीट मी, कैसे मैं मिला आप लोगों से, ऐसा बात करना। तो कितना एसोसिएशन था वो भक्तों के साथ में, उनका कितना प्रेम था गिरिराज स्वामी को लोगों का। हाँ, हो सकता है 1 महीने के बाद मरा होगा आदमी। और यहाँ तक गिरिराज प्रभुपाद जी ने बताया है, गिरिराज स्वामी बताते हैं कि हम लोग, आदमी मर गया तो उसके घर में जाते कीर्तन करते थे, चौथाई पे, तीसरे पे, जब भी है कोई बुला था कीर्तन करते। ऐसे नहीं कि नहीं करते थे, सब जगह कीर्तन करते थे। ये उनकी शिक्षा है। और उनके साथ में हम लोग गए, हमने कीर्तन किया उनके साथ में। तो ये बहुत ही अनुभवी बात इस किताब से हमको मिलती है। आप सभी लोग इस किताब को पढ़िए। बहुत 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 बम्बई में जितनी भी घटना घटी है वो सारी बातें रिकॉर्ड हो गई हो किताब के अंदर, और उन्होंने प्यूरिटी के साथ में लिखा हुआ है उसके साथ में। ओके, धन्यवाद। हरे कृष्ण। I tell after, okay?